So yesterday I went to Costco, which is kind of a big thing because it's a little ways away. And so trying to get there and do the things, I was driving through there and thought, why not stop at Costco? I've got a couple things to pick up.
A couple things to pick up.
And $250 later, I had more than a couple
More than
things.
a couple things.
And it would have been super easy for Brian to immediately assume the worst in that situation.
Yes, would have been very easy to think, what were you thinking? Why would you spend that much? We've been trying to rein in our spending. It's the holiday season. All these things would have been very easy to assume.
But he gave me the gift of the benefit of the doubt. And it really was a gift because I went in and realized while I was there that we were out of some significant things in our house and we don't get to Costco very often. So with the budget in mind for November and holidays and hosting, I was able to actually plan ahead and get some things that we were going to need. And I'm really, really grateful that we have.
Yeah, and knowing that myself, knowing that, or actually no, not even knowing that, I trusted that Elisa knew that, and so was able to just receive what was done with okay, that was a good idea.
And thinking about that, when I got home and he's like, "So, what did you get?" And I told him I didn't feel like I had to hide anything from him or like position or defend anything. Just was able to say, "Wow, look at the things that I was able to get," and we were able to get some things in our pantry and freezer that are going to be really helpful. So we are Brian and Elisa Hope, and with years as a mental health therapist and as a pastor and as many years being married, we are wanting to bring to you some hopes for your marriage.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. We all know the saying of what happens when we assume. I don't even need to say it. I don't even need to tell you. You know what happens. But we realize that happens most often because we assume the worst. We come into a situation or a situation comes to us and we immediately interpret it and make assumptions on the negative side. They were obviously out to get us. They're obviously out to hurt me. They're obviously out to spend all my money. That was an obvious indulgence. And I was told I couldn't spend money on things, and you went and spent money on things. So I am assuming when we assume that way, that's what happens is when we assume. But we want to come today and offer a new exercise or maybe exercising a different kind of assuming that rather than assuming the worst, we come to each other in marriage, trusting that you love me and you trusting that I love you, where we actually assume the best when there is ambiguity and doubt as to what was going on.
You recently were in a situation where somebody did not give you benefit of the doubt. And I'm curious if you remember how that felt.
Oh, I remember. It was terrible. It feels as though, first of all, what's the point of even trying? It feels like somebody else is digging out the ground under my feet and I can't get out of it. And that any kind of offering of explanation or clarity just makes matters worse because there's this filter, this grid that is on that says whatever I say is just going to be interpreted as the worst. And so I'm just going to not say anything and wait for this to be over.
So pretty quick shutdown.
Very hard shutdown.
And it's defeating.
Very defeating. Yeah.
And I'm wondering how often in marriage that cycle happens. We get stuck in that loop. So the worst is assumption or assumed, and then somebody just pulls back more and more, and that shutdown feeling or just feeling really defeated becomes the norm. The why even try?
Right. Which honestly creates all the more reason to doubt and mistrust. So you start seeing the cycle just perpetuating and the gap getting wider, and the sense of self-justification for assuming the worst because, well, they're never really honest. I feel like they're withholding and they're keeping something from me because we keep assuming the worst and put ourselves in that dynamic where you just can't build trust and intimacy and freedom, even freedom to fail.
Yeah. Because, I mean, let's be honest, we fail each other all the time.
Yeah.
But there are so many opportunities in marriage to make assumptions. We make interpretations all the time, all day long. We are given opportunity to interpret why somebody does something the way they do, or what might be going on. There's interpretations going on all the time, and oftentimes we're not even aware of it. And those interpretations can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if we expect or assume the best, sometimes that can lead to then that person really stepping in and stepping up and becoming what they are seen as. And unfortunately, a lot of times that goes on the negative side of things. And so we want to offer you kind of a template or a couple tools to help you start identifying what might have become a cycle, or maybe just strengthen something that's already going well, but something to just take a look at and see where it might even be encouraged. So the first thing that we want to talk about is noticing when you are making interpretations. We tend to just think, well, this is just the way it is. He just always does it that way, or she's always that way. And so, of course, that's just the way it is. And so I'm just going to assume that's the way it's going to continue. And we live in this experience all the time, and we never step out of it and say, I am bringing thoughts to this every time. And so I want you to just take this week to notice the interpretations that you're making, what you are assuming when your spouse says or does something. And it's helpful to just kind of put judgment aside. Don't come in with, I should be thinking this or should not. Don't jump to that yet, or else that will shut you down. You are criticizing yourself.
You're going to just assume the worst of yourself like you do your spouse.
So we're just noticing. Just become the observer and notice when it is that you tend to make assumptions that are on the negative or critical or kind of worst case scenario side.
Mm-hmm. And then begin asking, but there's a new way we want to introduce of asking questions, because when we assume the worst and we get up the courage or the anger or frustration, whatever it is that's fueling our asking, all right, I'm going to go find out, we will either come at it with curiosity or interrogation. And we want to encourage you to come at it with a curiosity once you can identify those times when, wow, I'm really assuming the worst of this situation right now. To come at it in love and a sense of togetherness is to ask with curiosity, can you help me understand? I don't quite get it, why you went and spent that much money at Costco. I thought we were saving, and that was spending. And those always seem to be opposite. So I'm curious about that, because I trust that you didn't try to, ruin us. I know that you're not out to get me. So I'm just curious, rather than an interrogation mindset, which is accusatory, which is oppositional, which is fear-based. And, you've probably felt that feeling. I'm getting interrogated, which makes you want to just not talk, back up, defend yourself, lob grenades the other direction, and make matters worse. So we want to encourage you to ask and press into those areas of assumption, assuming the best, and that means asking with curiosity instead of interrogation.
Mm-hmm. And curiosity invites somebody in. Mm-hmm. That's the way of saying, help me understand. There's humility that comes with curiosity. I don't know exactly what was going on. I don't know why you did. And that's okay that I don't know. And I'm not going to assume that I do know. So help me understand. So a couple things that you can do is you notice when you're making those assumptions, when they tend to go worst case scenario, and remind yourself that it actually is just as much of a chance to be best case scenario. And most likely it's somewhere in between. And so challenge yourself, what would I feel and how would I respond if it was best case scenario? And then if I'm not sure, then go ahead and enter into that dialogue with humble, compassionate curiosity.
Mm-hmm. Because remember, we're talking about giving our spouse the benefit of the doubt, meaning you don't know. There's no evidence proving one way or the other. So making the assumption of the best, you're not really risking anything. We'll talk in a minute why do we always assume the worst? Why don't we start trying to assume the best and working that muscle a little bit?
Now, I want to be clear. This is not denial. This is not saying we're just going to ignore. I may have had, if I had had a spending issue and I continued to compulsively overspend, then Brian would have every reason to be concerned. And we would need to have discussion and work around that. So this isn't having something that is clear that we're just ignoring and putting on the rose-colored glasses. It is that we are unsure, and so we're going to put the lens on of humble curiosity and give someone the benefit of the doubt, doing the work of addressing what needs to be addressed that is clear in our marriage, that needs work.
And we want to reiterate, we mentioned this in a previous video, that if there are issues that are evidence-based and are real and ongoing, then that's the time to go seek out professional help. Get in with a marriage counselor, talk to your pastor, get together with friends who you trust, who can speak wisdom and truth into your life, and start working on that. We're not talking about the clear evidence-based reasons for problems. We're talking about you don't know, and so let's give
We're just speaking to the 95%.
95% of the time of issues. That's all. That's all.
Yeah.
Just the 95%, right? And we want to also raise an issue of why, and maybe this is another thing that you can take some time to think through and pray through, because it's not always very clear. Why do I assume the worst when, as you've taken notice and notice, like when are the scenarios where I assume the worst and jump into interrogation? Why are those the situations that get me going? And why am I assuming the best in those scenarios? That's a really important process to go through, because you'll be able to start applying truth to that.
Yeah, we do have a human tendency, to assume the worst. Some of that is just self-protective. We've had hard things, bad things happen. And so we have this lie, this belief that feels like truth in our mind, that if I can prepare for the worst, then it's not going to take me off guard if it happens. So we just always assume the worst so that we're not shocked when something bad happens. So that's one of the reasons.
We've also all been hurt by being trusting and giving ourselves to somebody and having it betrayed or taken advantage of. And so we're slow to give ourselves, and assuming the worst can feel that self-protective and defensive technique that is sometimes at a survival level that we need to be careful of. We're also by nature insecure. We're by nature prideful. Of course I'm right and you're wrong. That's just a law of my universe.
I know best.
I know best.
I know you better than you know yourself. Those are all lines we hear.
That's right. So take some time to look at that. Why am I assuming the best? And we want to back this all up, as we do with all of our material here with Hopes for Marriage, that we want to strengthen and reinforce a gospel-centered marriage. And as you gain insight into why it is you are assuming the best and find yourself feeling, oh, I have insecurity, or I feel vulnerable and I feel alone and I feel like I have to protect and defend and justify myself, what we see in God is such a love and a grace and a goodness. We assume the worst because we don't see everything. God sees everything, and God knows you, all of it. So there's no assuming from God. There's no doubt in God's mind about who you are, and yet he has extended so much grace, so much love and invitation and intimacy to you, that as you take stock and see those things that cause you to assume the best, that you can overlay the truth of the gospel on that and say, well, the Lord sees me, and no doubt sees me for who I am, and yet loves me without any hindrance, without any reluctance, and continues to invite me into his presence, and that we can do that, offer that to our spouse.
Yes. So we hope that this week that you can step back and observe what's going on and be strengthened in this area and give your spouse the benefit of the doubt, because out of that space, then we can start seeing gospel flourish in our own lives, because we can't do it in our own strength. We need God's strength to be able to offer that. It's vulnerable to hope and to assume the best. So draw from God's strength that he gives us, and then see what God does with that in you and in your spouse. So those are our hopes for your marriage this week.
Have a great day, week, and we will see you next time.